And we've got 3 lights on already, 4 and now 5. It's the Australian Grand Prix, it's lights out and away we go. Verstappen and Sainz getting away pretty evenly. Leclerc's coming at Lando Norris. Verstappen's going to lead into turn.
G'day, Formula One mates! Welcome to Formula Pun Racer, the channel where car racing and comedy collide, and where you don't have to be a race fan to get a good laugh. With that said, since I spoke with an Australian accent in this intro, it tells us one thing. This is my video review on the Australian GP, which occurred back on March 24th at Albert Park in Melbourne. And there'd be a few unexpected surprises about in this one, because the dominance of Red Bull racing would be challenged in a way you would have never imagined. And it all started, well, predictably with Max Verstappen, the Red Bull driver, on pole. Once again, the 3-time world champion was definitely on a roll here. And Carlos Sainz Jr., who had just recovered from his appendicitis surgery and missed out on the Jeddah race in Saudi Arabia, was back to race in round 3 and started in second place for the Ferrari team. So that was quite surprising. Naturally, though, when the lights went out, Max Verstappen started to take off. But the Ferrari of Carlos was not too far behind. And while the Red Bull Honda-powered cars seemed to show its full potential as it usually has, trouble was just around a corner. Cracks were starting to show for the Red Bull driver because on lap 3, Carlos Sainz was able to get by Max for the lead, but then later on that lap, his right rear tire started smoking because it turns out his car had some brake issues with the right rear. Oh boy. And then by lap 4, he had no choice but to pull in the pits, and the pole sitter, Max Verstappen, was the first retirement of the race. And his first retirement since the 2022 Australian GP. So after 43 races of finishing, this is one he finally fails to finish dead last. I know, who would have thought? The dominant Flying Dutchman starting at the top, finishing dead last. How embarrassing. This would give Carlos Sainz a strong lead, with Lando Norris in the McLaren second, and Sainz's teammate Charles Leclerc in third. The next retirement would come on lap 17, when Verstappen's biggest championship rival, at least back in 2021, Lewis Hamilton, was out with engine failure, bringing out the virtual safety car.
Game over, yeah!
When the race restarted, Carlos Sainz continued to lead on in his Ferrari. The only other notable action on the track before the checkered flag occurred at the halfway point on lap 29, when the 2 McLarens of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris were 3rd and 4th respectively. And this was definitely pleasing a lot of the local fans, as Oscar Piastri was probably on his way to his first podium finish. However, the McLaren boss, Zak Brown, told the drivers to swap positions because Lando Norris had fresher tires. So unfortunately, Oscar Piastri had to relent to his British teammate Lando Norris to take 3rd place. This is definitely not very exciting for the Australian fans. Not at all, mate. The rest of this race was pretty much uneventful until the final lap, when George Russell in his Mercedes and Fernando Alonso in his Aston Martin would duke it out for a 6th spot. However, it turns out that with Alonso ahead of Russell in those first few corners of that final lap, it turns out he kind of brake-checked George Russell, causing Russell to lose control by taking evasive action to avoid hitting Alonso's Aston Martin, and then would go slamming into the tire barrier, and then pretty much finish on his side. So it was quite a tilting experience for Russell, but at least he was not hurt. I know, pretty interesting seeing me on a tilt like this, just like George Russell's car. Once again, the young Brit was okay, but he was definitely not happy with how this turned out. Fernando Alonso crossed the finish line in 6th place, but because it was a last lap incident, he was given a 20-second penalty and demoted to 8th place. Pretty embarrassing for Aston Martin. And also on top of that, Fernando has been given 3 penalty points.
What'd you say?
Oh yeah, what a bop on the chin it was for Fernando Alonso. With this demotion, Yuki Tsunoda of Japan in his Visa Cash App Racing Bulls Honda was promoted to 7th place, And ironically, Alonso's teammate, Lance Stroll of Canada, finished in 6th, so a little more points for Lance Stroll for once, eh? True, it might have been a disappointment for the local fans to see Oscar Piastri be forced to relinquish his potential 3rd place to his own teammate Lando Norris, which he finished. But hey, at least Oscar Piastri finished a best home finish of 4th place, so that ought to count for something. Right, mates? But when all was said and done, for the first time since last year's Singapore Grand Prix, Carlos Sainz Jr. of Spain gave the first non-Red Bull race victory in Formula 1 in Australia, and his Monegasque teammate Charles Leclerc finished 2nd. A 1-2 finish for the prancing horse. Oh, I'm sure the Italian stallion must be singing with glee after a long time of not winning and finally coming out on top 1-2.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I too found that singing horse hilarious too, Lelouch v Britannia. Man, I wish I had your looks. Oh, and speaking of Japanese characters like him and other anime characters, if you enjoyed that steak and shrimp on the Barbie party with Ferrari in Australia, the next round would take place in the land of anime, Honda, and Yuki Tsunoda, the Japanese Grand Prix Suzuka a week later. Unfortunately, if you're expecting anything but boring dominance from Max Verstappen, you'd be disappointed. He started on pole, and here's how it turned out when the lights went out.
On the front row, Max Verstappen on the right-hand side of your screen. On pole position, it's lights out and away we go, and Max Verstappen gets away very well and cuts off his teammate. Now behind him, Fernando Alonso is already trying to get past Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris, but that's not happened.
On top of Max Verstappen's Red Bull Honda being on pole on home soil to the delight of the Japanese fans, Sergio Perez, Max's Mexican teammate, started 2nd, locking out the front row for Red Bull Honda. Lando Norris's McLaren started 3rd, and Carlos Sainz Jr.'s Ferrari started 4th. Oh, and when I said that it was a week after Australia, my mistake. The Japanese Grand Prix was 2 weeks after Australia, my mistake. On top of it all, well, it seemed like a clean start for the front runners, but in the second turn of the first lap, it all went horribly wrong for Daniel Ricciardo and his V-Carbs Honda as he collided with Alexander Albon of Team Williams, both ending up in the tire barrier. Both were okay, but it turns out that it brought out the red flag because the tire barrier got damaged in the mix. So once again, because of this little tangle that resulted in the Williams Mercedes of Alexander Albon and the Visa Cash App Racing Bulls Honda of Daniel Ricciardo tangling together and bringing out the red flag and stopping the race, once again, we went for a long wait for them to go back to green, and I gotta admit one thing. Waiting for a race to go back from red to green can be so tiring. Whoa. What a dream. I was beginning to see like Red Bull crashing miserably in Japan, letting Ferrari and Aston Martin slide on by to take on a great top 3 position for those two teams. But of course, that's when I just woke up. So let's see what really happened in Japan, shall we? Sorry about that, F1 fans. Now, when the race restarted, once again, Max Verstappen pretty much took off in his Red Bull rocket of a race car, never looked back. And there wasn't much action going on the track either that whole time. 3 retirements, Ricciardo, Albon, and Zhou Guanyu out with some engine troubles. But that was pretty much it. No major moves on the track either, but when all was said and done, spoiler alert, Max Verstappen wins again, and his teammate Sergio Perez finished 2nd, a Red Bull 1-2 in Japan. Well, at least that would please the Honda fans, alright. Carlos Sainz's Ferrari finished 3rd, his teammate Leclerc finished 4th, and Fernando Alonso, despite a bad setback in Australia, finished a 6th place honestly, with Lando Norris 5th. And on top of that, if the Honda thrill of finishing 1-2 wasn't exciting enough, the other Honda left in the race, driven by Yuki Tsunoda, took 10th place to score the one final point. So, I say, omedetou Yuki Tsunoda for securing 1 point on home soil. Yes, Lelouch, I'm sure all of Japan is just as happy as you are seeing Honda finish first and second, as well as Yuki Tsunoda getting that final points finishing position of 10th, even if it's just 1 point. Once again, omedetou Yuki Tsunoda-san for that one. The next round is this Sunday, April 21st, the Chinese Grand Prix, the first time in 5 years that F1 has raced in China. It'll also be the first time for a Chinese driver to race on home soil. Good old Zhou Guanyu will take his debut race on home soil in Shanghai for Sauber. So let's see how well he fares on home soil. And a lot of people will be flocking to see him, and that's a fact. But when all is said and done, Max Verstappen seems likely to maintain his dominance. Will he do it in China? Tune in to find out. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. This concludes my video review of the Australian and Japanese Grand Prix. If you like these videos, as well as this one, please share, like, and subscribe to Formula Pun Racer, where you don't have to be a racing fan to get a good laugh. And, of course, to see my previous videos, too. Well, tune in once again, April 21st for the Chinese Grand Prix. It's lights out and away we go. See you in the next video, everyone. I'm Aaron Cylinder, firing on all cylinders.